If you are a frequent listener to the podcast, you know that we have been sponsored by Fuji Sports for quite some time now. Whether you're looking for apparel, equipment, bags, or accessories, Fuji Sports has got it covered. Go to fujisports.com to see the latest selection of everything you need for your jiu-jitsu, judo, or MMA journey. That's fujisports.com. Let me take a minute to tell you about RŌL TV. If you're looking to take your jiu-jitsu to the next level and supplement your BJJ education, then RŌL TV has you covered. RŌLAcademy.tv has over 1,500 videos covering individual techniques, positions, and concepts, including seminars and workshops with top-level competitors and instructors like Chris Wojcik, Robert Drysdale, Aaron Hurley, Emily Kwok, and more. Whether you are a beginner or more advanced student, RŌL TV is the online platform that can take your jiu-jitsu to the next level. What's up, everyone, and welcome back. If you haven't already, please hit the like, share, subscribe, download, listen, and whatever other button there is, and leave us a review wherever you do listen. This helps us bring you the great guests and amazing content that you've come to expect. In this conversation, Thomas's guest shares her journey to recently achieving her black belt, reflecting on the emotional weight of the rank, the perception and responsibility that comes with it, and the importance of consistency and mastery in her practice. She discusses the role of her environment in shaping her experience, the significance of teaching and giving back, and her aspirations for the future as an instructor. Throughout the conversation, she emphasizes the value of perseverance, personal growth, and the unique challenges faced by women in a male-dominated sport. Here's the RŌL Radio with a PANS medalist, Grapplers Lab coach, and new Atos black belt, Rose Miller.
Welcome to RŌL Radio.
And we are live. Professor, how are you?
Hello, I'm great. Thank you for having me on. How are you?
Welcome back to the RŌL Radio. Thank you for joining me. And how does it feel when students or people call you professor? Is that sinking in?
Yeah, it's funny because people joke around all the time and they'll say, "Oh, thank you, professor," before you're a black belt, just to each other, joking around. But now it's actually, I don't know, I guess the correct title, but I don't know. It's cool, I guess, but also like I'm still the person I was a week ago before I had a black belt. And so I don't know. And I also know that in Portuguese, it's actually a more casual term than it is here. So it's kind of like, depending on who you're talking to, I think it carries a slightly different weight and connotation. So, I'm still just me. So that's how I think about it. Just a different salutation, I guess.
Is that title important in jiu-jitsu? I guess for those who don't know, you were just rewarded a black belt, and if anybody has been living under a rock and hasn't seen that, I mean, you've been just rewarded a black belt, so this is very fresh, probably very emotional. A lot of new things are happening, and yet nothing really changed, just like what you're describing here, right? But this is the moment where I feel like a lot of the big shift takes place in the sense of now a lot of people will call you professor. A lot of people will look up to you in some way.
That I do feel.
How does it all feel?
I definitely feel. I don't want to say the weight of, but maybe the honor of, because I remember when I was a white belt, and I would see even the brown belt women or the black belt women, and I would just, and men, but I think as a woman in jiu-jitsu, kind of seeing yourself represented at the highest level was really cool, especially in a male-dominated sport. And I remember thinking that, one, it was going to take forever to get there, that like it was this impossible thing, and that, very naive white belt perception that these people must have everything figured out, and then to be there myself, it simultaneously feels like it did take a lifetime, because I know everything that I've lived through and experienced over the last 11 years. But at the same time, I am still that same white belt girl that was stepping onto the mat for the first time. And it feels like it was just yesterday, And so it's kind of cool for me to think back to where I started and the women that I looked up to at that time, and now kind of accepting the responsibility, the honor to hopefully be able to be that person for someone else. Um, so it's kind of like life, you think when you're a kid, you think 30 is old, and then you get to be 30 and you're like, this ain't old. I'm still figuring it out, you know? But you also have so
Yeah.
much experience and wisdom because of that. So it's a very similar feeling to me.
And for those of you guys who have not listened to Rose's story originally, I encourage you to look at 191, episode 191. And that was over a year ago. Can you believe that it was? I mean, I feel like we just talked about it. Matter of fact, when I messaged you, I was thinking this might be too soon. We just talked. And then I look at the date and it was over a year. It was April of 24. So again, I appreciate you being here and then catching up with me. But it's interesting that you say all of this, because from one side, you say right off the bat, you said, nothing really changed. And from the other side, you said, well, but now I feel that weight. And for those who listen from the outside might say, well, like, all these people are out of their minds. Like, from one side, nothing changed, but from everything changed. And do you find this somewhat confusing, almost like in the environment of emotions? Like, we work so hard for a decade to achieve this moment, and then we feel like, and this is not only exclusive to you, this is many people, including myself, nothing really has changed. I'm still the same person. I trade the same way. If I trained last night, I trained today. But yet we feel like there is a big shift that takes place,
I think
doesn't it?
The knowing that the perception that other people might have of you changes. So like my understanding of myself doesn't change, and even probably the understanding of or people's perception who are very close to me probably doesn't change. But like I said, if there's like a new white belt or, a blue belt that sees me now, there might be this additional layer of perception, I think. And so I think it mostly comes down to how other people are perceiving you. When you're a white belt, right? No one expects anything of you. If you make a mistake, it's people expect that, And then when you become a black belt, for me, it's the very beginning that all the colored belts are gaining tools and preparing you to, the first day I trained, I'm going on a tangent, I know, but the first day after promotions that I trained, we actually had the Korean national team training with us. So I get to the gym. Atos already has very large classes, very packed classes. This particular day, there were 100 people on the mat at 9 a.m. And there were over 30 black belts on the mat. And so you can imagine the range of experience represented just in the black belts, not even considering people who have been training, a couple months or a year or a handful of years, but black belts who have been a black belt for me, a weekend and other people for probably decades. And so I felt like I was stepping in literally like a tiny little baby in a giant footprint, with just like so much room to grow and learn still, but also standing at my most confident. So I think it's this kind of, you feel like you're brand new. You feel like you're new in the club, similar to how you feel when you first start jiu-jitsu when you're a white belt. Only now there is this perception and maybe this expectation that you perform a certain way or know something. And so, I think for me, it's just understanding that none of that really matters, and I'm still going to keep doing what I'm doing. But it's kind of that same feeling of feeling super confident and then also brand new again.
Let's unpack this a little bit, because how would you feel the same way if you would be stepping onto the mat with the Korean team and everything is the same, but it's a week prior?
I think for me, it was more, I think I did feel different because they were here before I got promoted. And so I was, training with visitors and training with people. And it's not so much that I see myself differently, but it's Yeah, I don't know. It's a hard thing to describe because nothing really changed, but I think I saw myself at the very beginning of this path that people had come before me, and truly it kind of represented a new beginning for me. Instead of being the top of the colored belts, I'm a brand new black belt.
It's interesting feeling,
Mhm.
isn't it? It is something unique, something that is almost difficult to describe as we go through this and visualize this for many, many years. I'm sure you've been in the same position. Like rewind this a month ago, a year ago, 5 years ago. I'm sure you're visualizing at some point. It's like, I would love this. This rank of black belts and this achievement, this milestone. It is something that we reach for. And it brings very emotional moment when it does happen, doesn't it?
It was funny because I don't want to say I didn't get emotional, but I did not cry at my promotion, and that kind of surprised me. And I think it's two parts. I think on the one hand, I've spent a decade learning and telling myself belts don't matter, belts don't matter, belts don't matter. Train, learn, keep that white belt mentality. You're just trying to grow your skills, and it's not so much that for me, kind of what I've reconciled is that it's not so much that the belt or the rank means something objectively, but it is a personal goal that I set out for myself to achieve. And I wanted to get it from the person I got it from. And it's just really cool to see that I stuck with it. It's a representation of my personal commitment, my personal values, my personal goals for myself. And it might represent something different to every single person who receives a black belt. But for sure, it doesn't come easily or quickly. And it does take a lot of dedication and a lot of commitment. And I think that that's something that prior to starting jujitsu, I don't want to say I lacked commitment, but I was almost just working really hard, but kind of spinning in circles. I wasn't working really hard to go anywhere. And for me, this kind of represents that I had vision for my life. I had vision for something I wanted to accomplish. And so instead of spinning my circles, I was actually building something. I was actually working towards something. And I think that's what honestly meant the most for me. I know my skills are going to continue to grow and improve. I know this is not the end of that, but it's almost like not the first benchmark, but a big major benchmark for me that I'm not spinning my circles. I've been working towards something, progressively growing. And I'm just really thankful that jujitsu gave me something to put myself into like that.
You speak about a very interesting topic here. You emphasize the fact that this is just in the beginning in some sense. It's almost like a rebirth in some sense. We've done all this work for a decade or so, and then now it's this new beginning, this new milestone. Why do you think that there is a lot, a vague statement, but a lot of black belts who retire at the beginning of that moment?
Man, I mean, I think a lot of people see it as an end. If you see this as your only goal or your
Mhm.
ultimate goal, then you achieve it. And you need something beyond that to stay invested if you want to be. I understand that that's not everyone's aim or purpose. It's always kind of blown my mind how you could commit to something for a decade and then move on. But on the other hand, it also kind of makes sense. It's hard, but for me, black belt was a goal, but it was not the goal. For me, mastery is my goal, and that's kind of never ending. So for me, receiving my black belt from Professor Andre Galvao is a sign that I am moving in the right direction, you know? And there are so many things that when I look back that, maybe I thought I was going to be somewhere different than I am now by the time I received black belt. Maybe I thought I would have accomplished different things, but there's so much that has happened that I couldn't have even imagined. And so for me, it's just this continued exploration. So yeah, for me, I don't see it as an ending at all. But I think that just depends on each individual's goals with it. You And I think it's hard to maybe receive a black belt and then want to, some people, I mean, we're talking 10 years, you've aged in that time too. Priorities changed. And
Hmm.
so maybe what was working to get to black belt is no longer working just as far as priorities, family, job, scheduling. And it's hard to maybe go from training, every day or however often to then needing to cut that back and then feeling like you are regressing because you are no longer as present in that space anymore. So I could also see that.
Yeah, I mean, to each their own, essentially, right? We all have different goals, different objective, and honestly, the purpose of jujitsu is different for people and for different people. What's an objective in jujitsu for you might be different for me or somebody who is, I don't know, 65 years old. I mean, all these variables really play a significant role. But it is interesting how you're describing this as a very beginning of it. And let's be honest, you're not at the
Yeah.
beginning. Like 11 years later, there's nothing beginning about
hmm
this, isn't
hmm
it?
Yeah. So yeah, it's a new beginning, right? So it's not the beginning, but a new beginning.
Right.
And I think that just kind of gets me more excited. I feel like like I said, I spent the last 11 years just collecting tools to be able to test and play with them now. And I think some people will feel this way, especially if you're like a very high level, competitive, colored belt. Some people might feel this way earlier on, or experience it multiple times. Who knows? But for me, that's very much what it feels like. There's definitely an excitement, not a feeling of being like burnt out or tired of it. I'm just excited to keep going. Like, okay, I finally like hit one of my goals. I have more.
Well, and good for you. I think that drive to really achieve more really sets us for success when it comes to, driving forward and there's so much more to come. I'm hoping in 10 years we're gonna have another episode and we'll talk about how does that feel when you've been training for 2 decades. I think all this is a beautiful part of it. But I'm thinking there has to be a certain level of pressure that's associated with this. You've been a person in a public eye for a while now. You've established a quite successful following, especially from females on Jiu-Jitsu mat. And now, you're the professor. Do you feel certain responsibility or certain pressure to deliver different things in a sense of, well, you were not a black belt a week ago or so, or a couple of weeks ago, but now you are, and that perception has changed slightly in the public view, doesn't it?
I think the perception does change. It's kind of funny how this happens. It also happened at brown belt, where as soon as I got promoted to brown belt, new opportunities came. As soon as I get promoted to black belt, new opportunities
Hmm.
come, and I'm super grateful for that. I wouldn't call it pressure. Andre talks to us often about the black belt being a phase of giving back, and you should really be prepared to give back when you are a black belt, in the same ways that people gave to you when you were coming up. And so I do feel a sense of responsibility, but it's something I'm very excited for. Something I've realized over the last 2 years is that I probably find my most fulfillment through sharing jujitsu with other people, um, seeing it click and make sense, and yeah, giving back in that way. I've found that I love teaching, and so it's not pressure, I guess, in a negative way. It's I want to rise to the standard. I really want to create inclusive environments where people want to stick with it. You know, I want to teach in a way that, like, if I can explain something in a way that clicks and makes sense for someone, then I know I'm not only understanding it in a way that makes sense for me and applies for me, but applies on a broader scope. And for me, that is cool. Because one of the first things I discovered when I started teaching is just because it makes sense to me doesn't mean it's going to make sense to other people. So if I'm able to translate that in kind of multiple languages, then I feel like my understanding, my knowledge, my depth of knowledge is there. And so I think that that is something that's very, very important to me.
Well, that's truly what separates an instructor from a great instructor, the ability of take whatever is inside the skull and process it somehow and verbalize it and showcase it, because that's a separate skill of creating a presentation in a sense where it makes sense to whatever 50, 60, 100 people in the room, right? And we essentially have one opportunity to do this. We might show a few times, we might talk about it, but like the moment we show it, time passes by and we kind of move on, right? And they have an opportunity to take this in. And if it's misunderstood in whichever form we are showing, then there's a confusion, right? We weren't as successful to present this in, right? So there is a certain skill that's associated with all of this, right?
Absolutely. And also just recognizing that being able to do something is different from really understanding it. Understanding it doesn't also necessarily mean that you can do it. And so bridging all of those gaps. So, teaching is my way, I think, of giving back. It's also my way of learning and continuing to learn. And I think that that's also really important to me. I don't have all the answers, but I am committed to continuing to learn and continuing to be a student. And I think that that's also something that's very important to me. People have asked me, are you opening your own school? I'm like, no. I mean, I teach locally in San Diego. I've taught for the last 2 years, but I'm not going anywhere. I'm staying at Atos. I want to keep learning, everything that there is and traveling around and learning from other people. So I think also setting that example that you can always learn.
And that's often misunderstood, isn't it? I think there's a lot of people out there thinking like, oh, you're a black belt, you have all the answers.
Yeah.
It gets downloaded
quick
instantly
debunk
overnight.
Although I will say, when I did find out I was getting promoted, it was just like that extra oomph in training for a couple weeks.
Was it? Well, that was one of the questions that I had, and I was planning on leaving it for later, but now since you brought it up, did you know? Did you know that was coming down the pipe?
Prior to actually finding out that I was going to get promoted, I did have a feeling that it would probably come soon, either at the end of this year or next year sometime.
Why? What gave you the indicators? Is it a conversation, or this is just feeling based on what is happening?
Just kind of a feeling, a vibe, just kind of guess. And, I also acknowledged I could be completely wrong and I could be brown belt for 5 more years, who knows, so I was a blue belt for a very long time. So I learned to not kind of anticipate or expect anything. But kind of just based off of, overall vibes, small comments here and there, but they did notify me about a week before promotions that I was going to get promoted, which was nice. Because I got to have my family come out. My parents came out from Florida, which was really meaningful because, they're not in jiu-jitsu at all, but they have been supportive my entire time in jiu-jitsu. And they really kind of treated it as if it was like a graduation of some kind, which was cool. My siblings, I have a lot of siblings and they're all very accomplished. My little brother is a doctor, and I felt like they held going to my brother's like white coat ceremony and med school graduation like the same way that they treated me receiving a black belt, and so that's cool because not everyone has that support.
All right. Spill the beans. How does the conversation take place? Do you have a formal letter being sent, or I don't know, a smoke signal, or like, is it a sit down conversation in a conference room, or is it more like, hey, you should get your family in?
Oh no, it's very direct.
Like,
they just email you and say, hey, you're getting promoted, invite your family, let's go. So very casual. And then I'm very close with Rolando. He's one of the coaches that I work with the closest. And so then we had a separate like text conversation about it. And then every day leading up, he would give me like a countdown, like 4 days left, 3 days left. Your last training session is brown belt, And so like, I feel like he tried to make it really special for me too. So, yeah.
Does that make you nervous? Does that increase the anticipation of it? Does the build up does that like burst with fireworks at the end, or is it more of a, well, I know it's coming, so the element of surprise is in a sense removed?
Yeah, it's I was kind of, I don't know what the right word is. It's not that I wasn't excited. I think part of it was maybe a little bit of disbelief. Part of it was also, I've been working so hard, so I'm not going to act like I don't deserve it or I can't believe it. I guess it was the feeling. Like, I've been working so hard. I've jiu-jitsu has given me this self-belief, and I also know, like, while everything's going to change, nothing is really going to change too. So it wasn't really, and I was just like, okay, it's time. It's happening. It's happening now. And I'm not going to doubt it. I'm not going to second guess it. And I'm just going to accept it gracefully and do my best to continue to grow into it.
Well, and good for you. I think that's a very mature way of tackling this very big milestone and emotional event. But we can't ignore any of this without talking about some of the standards that you mentioned a moment ago. Andre Galvao, one of the most recognizable personalities and names, brands in jiu-jitsu. You moved across the country to train at Atos. You've done a lot from a perspective of creating your own branding, but also contributing and growing, gaining the skill and having the acquisition of new skills. But the standards are high. I mean, there's no doubt that being black belt under Andre and under Atos is a huge deal. I mean, that's a big achievement. Do you feel like that is achievable in the sense of carrying the load of, I'm an Atos black belt now? Not to take away from anybody else or any other organization, but we can't ignore the fact that this is one of the biggest and one of the heaviest organizations there are there.
Yeah, so I want to correct one thing. I actually didn't move across the country to train at Atos. I moved across the country randomly on a whim. And
well, yes,
and
you're right. You're right, but
yeah,
still.
And I started at Gracie South Bay under Leticia Hibero. And then I've been training at Atos for the last about 6 years, maybe a little bit more than that now. But it was a big decision to switch teams. I switched teams with intention. It was not a decision I took lightly because I loved the gym that I was at before. But it's kind of like, when you start jiu-jitsu, you don't know what all is out there. And I was very curious. And, Atos is a big team and it is a big name. And so to answer your question, I think getting my black belt from Atos, I am very proud because I know I've continuously challenged myself there. Even within Atos is a huge school. You can kind of like choose your own destiny, right? There's different classes for different vibes. And I've put myself through pretty much all of them, whether I'm taking like a 9 a.m. class or going to the comp class or coming in at night, they all have like a different energy about them. And it's a hard room to stick with for a long time. In a sense, it's also easier because everyone there is like so motivated and so motivating and so inspiring. So in a sense, it's really easy to stay there. And in a sense, it's also really hard because some days are like really hard with the room that you're in. But for me, I knew that I went there for that. That's what I was pursuing. And so most of all, I'm really proud of myself for sticking with it. And I think it's really kind of hard to understand unless you've been there. But I am very proud that it is an Atos black belt from Andre Galvao and that I have spent the last 6 years there. I was there from blue belt. I was blue to black under Andre. And I'm very grateful for that. He's seen a lot of different versions of myself. Like I said, when you take 10 years to get a black belt or longer, you're potentially different people along the way. Uh,
Oh, you are. There's not potentially. I mean, we change. No matter how much you slice
yeah.
this, a decade or even 8 years or whatever the length was for you from blue to black,
hmm
you have changed. You have grown up. I mean, we all move forward in
hmm
time.
And so I'm just really
Yeah.
grateful to have had a team that has kind of seen me through that the whole time. Um, And I think that that was one of the most special things about it. Before he promoted me, he said, Rose has been here since Blue Belt. I remember when she got here, and being able to introduce him to my parents and them share how they both, from their own individual perspectives, see me grow and change. Andre seen me grow and change on the mat, but they've also seen how jujitsu has affected me as a human off the mats as well. So it's very cool from so many different angles.
Do you feel proud from the fact that now you became even larger motivation for other women who are perhaps just starting this journey?
Yeah, I mean, I hope that they're able to see themselves in me, you know? Um, I I hope so. I hope that I'm relatable. I hope that they know that, like, I started one day just a white belt just like they were too, you know? There's nothing uniquely special about me. I just made a choice and stuck with it.
Well, hold on. Let me challenge that, because I mean, we are very humble, and often we say, well, this is really nothing big deal, I just worked hard, I just showed up. But look, it is something unique, Rose, because you train with mostly male dominated sport. No matter how we slice it, that's the bottom line. Percentages are what they are. Perhaps there are classes individually designed for women, but still, it is a male dominated sport, and sticking around for a decade is not easy. Two, stepping into a room of 100+ people some of them might be even better than you. Some of them might be bigger than you, stronger. Physical attributes are a real thing, and you still stick around. There's probably many reasons why many people would walk away.
Well, yeah,
So there has to be something
I
extraordinary
think
about this.
I think it really comes down to, and granted, I don't hate on anyone for if they choose to quit jujitsu. You really have to be intrinsically motivated to stick with it for so long. But if it's something that you want to do for yourself, you can make the decision to stick with it, and knowing that the people that you see who you might feel like they're at the end, they all started at white belt. Like, envision all those people that you see that you wonder
Mhm.
how they got there, what they went through. Just picture them at white belt experiencing what you are experiencing, because it's probably there's some overlap there.
Yeah, yeah. And that's often forgotten, isn't it? Like when we look up to somebody at the very beginning, I think sometimes it goes through our minds like, oh, well, you are a black belt. Oh, you've been doing this for so long. Whatever the reasons are. But we often forget that person that we look up to, whoever they are, whichever discipline or sport or activity it is, at some point they had a day one. They had to start this. And we ignore that, don't
I
we?
think it's easy to forget. I think even when I was a blue belt, I mentioned I was a blue belt for a very long time. I identified as a blue belt. I felt like I was going to be a blue belt for my whole
Mhm.
life. And I had kind of come to accept and be okay with that. But I think it's easy to do the same thing and project that on other people. Oh, that person's a brown belt. That person's a black belt. That person's a purple belt, based off of where you met them, how long you've been interacting. And it's easy to just see them as that instead of see them as their whole history and their whole story and potential future, and being able to put yourself in that same position of, hey, I have a potential future here, if I choose to stick with it, if I choose to show up on the days that I don't want to and do the hard thing. I think a lot of people, I know some of my training partners, they've had times where they have, considered quitting and didn't quit. And it's kind of like they're stepping into that potential version of themselves and realizing that it is possible. So I think being able to see kind of a broader picture instead of just where we are in this moment in time is helpful.
This reminds me, this whole conversation of us not seeing the progression, we just see what happens in this moment. It reminds me of the story of Michelangelo sitting in a cafe drinking coffee. Are you familiar with that one? And a woman approaches him and she says, would you be able to draw something for me and I'll pay you for it? And He takes a few minutes, he draws it out, he gives it back to her, and he gives her a price. This is how much it's going to cost. And she, in some sense, she's almost upset about it, and says, well, how can you charge me this amount? This took you literally a few minutes to do. And he responds to her, it took me 40 years to be able to do it in a few minutes. And I think oftentimes when these topics come up of we see somebody accomplish something, we see a certain level of mastery in whatever we do, we forget how much work, how much grit, how much failure, to be honest, took to get to that one single moment that everybody is judging us by, that everybody is creating perceptions about us. Don't you think that there's a lot to
absolutely.
that?
And I think it's something that I even forget about myself. Sometimes when I go through old photos, I will say one of the times I got the most emotional was I made a post announcing that I received my black belt. And in the post, I just included photos from every belt. I included photos from every promotion that I had. And that was when I felt the most emotional. Because, when we're going through this and we're committed to it, you just kind of learn to, hey, I don't feel like doing it today, but I'm going to do it anyways. Or you move through the days that you don't believe in yourself. You embrace the days that you do, but you learn to kind of stay kind of even, you feel the high days, you experience the low days, but you don't really let it affect your self-talk or your vision or your actions, right? And that's something that I think jiu-jitsu teaches you, is that you can feel all the things, you can experience the highs and the lows, but you're not really going to let it change your self-talk or what you do, right? And so sometimes I think even I forget all the things I experienced over the last 10, 11 years, who I was when I started. And so when I saw those pictures, it kind of brought back a lot of those memories, and it really put it in perspective for me of, you've been working for this for a really long time. And I think sometimes even still, I surprise myself, I teach a lot of fundamental classes. And so I'll get a lot of white and blue belt boys who are much bigger than me, much stronger than me. And I'll be like, oh man, I don't know how this is going to go whenever I roll with them. And then it's fine, and I'm like, oh, I kind of know a thing or two. And so,
I mean, that has to feel good in some sense, right? That there's a certain level of expertise.
oh yeah. And I think
this.
it's hard, especially when you're training with people who are very similar skill level to you. I think it's something that is easy to forget. And so, training with a variety of skills, you can kind of remember oh, wow, this used to be a lot harder for me to roll with someone like this. And it really is it's gotten so much better.
Do you have often moments like this, like the little epiphanies, oh, wow, this is kind of cool. I can do this.
Yeah. I don't know about often, but I think that I started having them a couple years ago, and then I don't know, you gain confidence, you know what you're capable of, and then there's moments that remind you of it again and kind of put it in perspective. It's all about putting it in perspective. This thing that used to be really hard for me, especially when it's something very simple that maybe I don't use a lot or don't practice a lot, and realizing that I can pull these things out at different moments.
Somebody, I don't recall who it was, but somebody on the show, we had similar conversation, and they made an interesting analogy that in jiu-jitsu, we fail more than we succeed. If you take just a general term, we get smashed, things don't work, we fail, we get passed, we get mounted, whatever the cases might be. This is how we grow, and that's a good thing. But because the amount of the failures that we establish, we really forget how it feels to succeed. As a result of that, when those success points come in, they are tenfold more satisfying than anything else that might feel. We almost have these epiphanies. Oh, well, that was easy. Well, of course it's easy. But we forget about them. The emotional connection to these things is much more complex than we envision that. Have you experienced that?
Oh, yeah. I mean, I think that it can be big things, it can be small things, but there's little reminders. It's almost like seeing your progress real time, you know? Oh, yeah, I have,
Hmm.
of course that's working now. I have been working on it, you know? I think my favorite
Yeah.
way to experience this is when I've put something on the back burner that I was working really hard at, and then for whatever reason moved on, started working on something else, haven't really thought about it. And then out of nowhere, some random day, my body just does it, you know?
Does it?
And it's like, okay, all of that work wasn't for nothing. And it's just a reminder. I tell people a lot, especially if they're experiencing a plateau, that learning is conscious, but performance is unconscious. And so usually, at least for me, if I have been really focused on a specific position or a specific type of attack, that's not normally when I succeed with it. That's when I'm learning it, trying to understand it. I'm slow. I'm probably overthinking it. But then when I stop doing that, when I feel like I have consciously processed it as much as I can, and I am not even really actively trying to make it happen, that's when it happens, you know? Um,
Yeah.
and that is, I think, the best feeling of just like, okay, it's in my body now. My body knows what to do. I don't have to think about it. Yeah.
Sealed. It's sealed. It's almost like riding a bike.
Yeah.
You get on the bike. You don't think about it. You don't think about holding handles. You don't think about pedaling. You don't even think about turning. It just happens, right? Like the moment we achieve that level of comfort, efficiency, and execution. I mean, one say like we know what we're doing, right? We just subconsciously do it.
And I think the cool thing too, I was talking with this about some of my white belts, is that everything feels hard at white belt for the most part, right? Like you're breathing heavy, you're white knuckling things, you're forcing things to happen. And my students were asking me, how do I not go 100% and still, try to win or try to succeed? And it was a great reminder about how one of the main priorities in jujitsu, I would say, especially for someone who is like a hobbyist or in it for like the martial art, is, or even to like see your own skill progression, is to recognize that you can set a level of effort that you are willing to give. I'm going to give, or I'm going to work with, Dima's zone 2 heart rate, for example, right? I'm not going to push so hard that I'm in like the red zone for my heart rate. Or we could look at this on an RPE scale, right? 1 to 10. Okay, if it takes me more than 6 RPE, I do not know this position or technique well enough, and so like even recognizing that you're able to kind of manipulate the intensity to get different types of training is really nice, so I forget what made me think about that, but I think that that's a really cool tool, I guess, training tool that you can use.
And it really puts it in a perspective, right? Because if we change the intensity, let's just say to 1, that means our efficiency
Is max.
and
Yeah.
mechanics have to be higher, right? However, if we change the intensity into, let's just say 8, then our efficiency can be lowered in a sense because our physical attributes compensate for it, right? And I guess my question to that is one better than the other? If we are in a flow mode, one might be preferred, but if we are in a competition mode,
well,
I don't know. Like, do we really want to be
think
flowing?
that the difference is this is your intensity. This isn't the intensity of your partner.
Yes.
And so your partner might be going at a much higher intensity. And then you're determining what intensity am I working at today? What's considered a success for me? And then the goal with this is that your efficiency improves so much that when you need to add your attributes to it, you have both at 100%, or both at what I think it's hard to train both simultaneously. At least that's what I have found for me, And so I have found, and this isn't something that I do, it's not like every round. I have very tough rounds where I'm at high intensities, but I also have really tough rounds where I am trying to succeed at something that I don't know as well as like my A game, and I can't make decisions fast enough. And so, it looks different. But the goal, I think, is to be able to have them both together, but we might develop them in separate ways.
Well, I would even take this deeper. I would even say that true mastery or true higher level of really execution will come in when we can scale up and down both intensity and the effort,
100%, yeah.
right? Like when we can at will we can manipulate them, because when we look at somebody who is a white belt, their efficiency is probably at 0,
but their effort is at
or
100.
1, right? But the effort is on 10. Like there's no, I don't know, one white belt who does not want to win. I mean,
and
like,
I think the thing is too, even
right?
when you bring effort down, when you have the skills, it's not that you don't want to win. It's that you've put a cap on,
that is true. You're absolutely right? But the moment we can scale each of them
Yes.
up and down at will, this is really when we can use the accelerator and brake, and we can manipulate the situation to our benefit, right?
Absolutely. And I really like the idea, because I get this question all the time. Like, okay, what if my partner's going too hard with me? That's fine. Let them go hard. And then it's up to you to determine what do I need to improve to keep up, right? Am I improving my attributes? Am I improving my technical skills? Some of both. Like, just because someone's coming really hard at you doesn't mean you have to meet them with that intensity. In fact, sometimes I have found that me lowering my intensity and focusing more on the technical part helps me control the situation better than if I see red and try to match their pace, And so being able to recognize that you and your partner don't have to have the same intensity all the time. You get to choose what you are willing to give in that moment. And with intention, you'll be able to learn something from that experience. It's hard, and it's especially hard
at the
when
very
you're
beginning. It was like, what do you mean I cannot go 100%?
And it's hard when you're new too, right? Because there's not a lot other than attributes at the very beginning.
Well, not only that, but I think we lack the ability of control of our bodies, our minds. I mean, at the very beginning, I don't know how it was for you, but for me, like, I mean, I didn't know how to. What do you mean I gotta go lighter? Like, what do you mean that mean? Like you want to go, but like your brain tells you to just push, right? Like you have this forward motion. There's no reverse.
I think part of that is like the composure piece,
Oh,
and so I tell my students, like, I'd rather you figure out how to breathe and bottom mount than have no idea what you're doing and potentially hurt yourself or someone else, And so I think really the focus on my first win is breathing, awareness, composure, being able to not panic or freak out.
Yeah, this is really fascinating, and we are shifting away from you. We're gonna get back there. Don't worry, I got a few more questions about you. But this is fascinating, because it especially at the very beginning, like when we get into these zones of panic, in a sense, right? This is where we accelerate instead of really thinking logically, right? So like, if we get dumped in the middle of the ocean, we panic, and we all know that like panic is the worst thing that you can do at that moment. But controlling that, almost developing like the what's the word I'm looking for? Like ignorance of the situation, or like
neutrality,
just tuning things down.
Neutrality,
exactly, right? Like staying calm is the most important part under those stress situations, right? If we are not calm, we cannot make logic out of the situation, and certainly we're not making any logical decisions, and then it all goes garbage. I mean, essentially, right?
Yeah.
Would you agree with the fact that as we continue training, as we continue creeping towards or even after the black belt, we develop more of a management of our mind and body versus the skill? Do you see what I'm trying to say? Like, I understand that we gain skill, but there is something to be said about staying calm.
Oh, absolutely. I think so. And I think that this is something that develops across, like, over the lifespan of training. I think it's something that I've definitely observed in myself. And I've even observed it switch. Like this morning, I had a round with a very, very tough partner, and I was calm, cool, and collected at the start. And then the more tired I got and the more she ramped up her pace, I saw myself like starting to lose that. So it's not even like it's black and white. Like it can change in a round, it can change in a
Mhm.
day, depends on, yeah, but it's something that you definitely gain mastery of as well.
That might be the harder part of
And the most
jiu-jitsu, isn't it?
helpful. And the most helpful. I like there's days where, I'm very tired and I wonder, "Oh, can I do it?" And then I remember, "Oh yeah, I don't need to feel a certain way to do jujitsu or succeed with my jujitsu. I just need to stay composed and stay grounded in the present moment." If I start worrying about what is going to happen in the future or what has already happened, maybe I end up in a bad position, then that's I think where it spirals. But if I'm able to stay in each moment, in the round, same thing with life in the day, right? You're going to be able to move through it, I think, with a lot more composure, and making the best decisions, right? Ultimately, that's what it comes down to, is making the best decision in that moment. And so if you're stuck in the past or worried about what will happen if you make the wrong decision, that's a recipe for panic. But if you can just stay grounded in the present, that's what's helped me at least.
Yeah. Yeah, certainly it is. I remember way back in the day when I was starting, and this is more than 2 decades ago, we used to do sparring sessions before we got into techniques. And I remember this very vividly, but by the time we got to any type of analyzing anything, you were so physically depleted and like emotionally drained that drilling was just difficult. Like even just coming to a point of focus and really thinking about what are we
Mhm.
working on, huh? It was very different. Have you
I've
ever
experienced that
done
before.
that or tried it in that
Yes.
aspect?
We've had classes like that before. I don't like it.
Oh, that you hate those, don't you?
I mean, I'll do it in whatever order, but I definitely feel like my brain power is much lower if I do
Mm-hmm.
technique second. I understand the purpose, right? Because then you can break down what you
Mm-hmm.
need to work on. But it's hard. It's
Yep.
hard to stay that mentally clear.
Yeah. Yeah, that's difficult under stress, under those circumstances. All right, let's pivot this back to you. Um, Black belt recently rewarded. You talked about your family being successful in some sense, and this is a big point of success. Um, what did they say? What did they say when they find
Oh, they
out
were very proud.
that you will
They
be
were
a black
super
belt?
proud. My mom just was focused on, it was actually really cool to see my mom's reaction or to hear my mom's reaction. Um, my parents have seen me go through so much since I started jujitsu. They've seen me kind of go from a little bit of a chaotic person. I was dealing with some mental health stuff.
Wait,
Yeah,
what? You seem to be very
thanks to
composed.
jujitsu.
Where's the
Thanks to
chaotic rose?
jujitsu. Let me tell you, before I started jujitsu, like I said, I moved across the country on a whim. It is
Mm-hmm.
very like adventurous, risk-taking girl, but it was also, I don't have a plan for my life. I don't know what I'm doing. Let's just make a big move. Let's just take a big step. I'm not going to say it was careless, but it wasn't planned at all. I had no vision. It was fun, but it was just kind of me going wherever the wind took me. And I still have a little bit of that in me. I like a good risk. I like a good adventure, but I think it was coming from this place of maybe panic or self-doubt or what am I going to do with my life? Also a place of confidence of thinking I would be able to figure it out, and I have a great support system back in Florida. Um I had started grad school, I quit grad school. I was having some mental health issues, just lots of ups and downs, and my life felt very unstable before I started jujitsu. I started jujitsu. I quit grad school. I lived in my car for a little
Mm-hmm.
while, and because I had lost my housing, lost my job. It was hard to get a new job, or I'm sorry, it was hard to get a new apartment if I didn't have a job, no proof of income. And instead of going back to Florida and figuring it
Mm-hmm.
out, I opted to stay in my car. So there is something very cool and gritty And, you know, I'm glad I had that experience, but also in a sense, it's like, how did you end up in that situation, Rose? You know? And, you know, I lived in fighter houses. I kind of wanted to work as little as possible so I could train as much as possible. And that was a big phase of my life and my jujitsu. But over the last decade, I've kind of realized, or I've learned how to have vision for my life. I've learned how to prioritize different things. I've learned how to put effort in a meaningful way instead of just putting effort for the sake of working hard, putting effort towards a certain direction and accomplishing it. Not just starting random projects because it looks cool or it feels cool or it feels fun, but really for growth, really for a purpose. And so I think that for my mom, she was just so proud of me that I stuck with it for so long, and really proud to see like where I started and who I am now and what I'm doing now. Because jujitsu has afforded me a career. It's afforded me community. It's given me vision. It's given me, honestly, just like mental stability, and not in a way that it's a crutch for me, but in a way that I have learned how to have like mental and emotional regulation tools so that I am who I am now, you know? And so I think for them, it was far more than just Rose has been training for a long time, but Rose has like changed over these 10 years.
They have to
Oh,
be
yeah,
proud of
they're
you.
very proud of me.
Many parents, as well as just young people, would see the path that you have chosen over the last 10 years or so as a wrong path, especially at the very beginning of it, where in the middle of it, many would say, sleeping in a car, you're nuts. Just going across the country, you're out of your mind. What do you mean jiu-jitsu? Jiu-jitsu doesn't pay any money. You need to get a real job. And we've talked about it originally when you were on the show. But now, decades later, and having these points of accomplishment, having these achievement points, milestones in life, you have grown quite a bit. What would you say to people who want to do that, yet they don't see the end of the
Yeah.
tunnel? Because it's hard to see it.
I mean, I didn't know if jujitsu would become a career for me. All I knew is I wanted to keep learning it, you know, keep improving, keep getting better at it.
Yeah, but I think I feel like it's easy to say that when we are 11 years later and we just got a black belt. But when we are blue belt or purple belt and life is hard, we want to continue doing it. I believe, personally, there's not one person who doesn't want to do jiu-jitsu in a sense of they don't like it. There's not many of those. But life throws curveballs, and sometimes life is hard. It's difficult to get to the gym. It's difficult to pay for the gym. Sometimes it's hard to even just do it mentally or physically. And many people quit. I mean, 90% people quit. It is what it is. What do you say to those people? I mean, you've gone through some hardships.
I mean, I've lived in my car. I lived in a van. I lived in a laundry room. I lived in a living room and a fighter house with like 12 Brazilians that were living there. I've had a lot of experiences. And, you know, I think it really is like the hardships are what make you proud when you look back on your journey. You know, I don't want to say like pursue discomfort, but the discomfort isn't bad, you know, especially like I don't want to make a blanket statement like that, because I think that there are certain situations where it's like, okay, we need to refocus. And I went through that too. I had a moment around COVID where jujitsu was kind of stripped away for a little while, and I recognized that I needed to have a more balanced life for me to feel fulfilled. So I think a part of this is like knowing what it means to you and knowing the risks that you're willing to take, and that you can shape your life with jujitsu, even though it's hard, you know, and moving through those hard things and figuring out how it fits in your life is a completely individualized choice. It'll look different for everyone, but if it's something that you want in your life, it will be worth it to figure out how it fits. You know, the time is going to pass regardless. And I personally wanted to find a way to make it fulfill my life instead of just thinking that if I wasn't doing it how other people were, that I couldn't do it. Or if I wasn't, I never really considered quitting, to be honest. It was never an option for me. It was always just about how to make this work for me, how to make it fulfilling for me. I think it's
So are you unique in that sense, or just a lot of people just think it?
I don't know. I think I'm in a
Well, I'm just thinking like this, Rose. I mean, like there is literally thousands of people probably every day quitting jiu-jitsu around the world, right? Why everybody else doesn't think the way you do? I mean, this sounds pretty simplistic.
Yeah.
Like, do what's right for you, continue following your passion, yeah, life is hard, so suck it up in a way, find a way, right? Like, I mean, the concept in general is not that complicated.
Yeah, I mean, I think that, I can't speak for other people. I also know that I've had a pretty unique journey in jiu-jitsu. I was single for a very long time. I got married a couple years ago, but like I had relationships, but they were all within jiu-jitsu. And, the people that I dated when I was training were living in fighter houses and living the same life. So I understand that not everyone has that, and people might have different priorities pulling them in different directions, which I think makes it easier. Like all the influences in my life were saying, stay, keep training. Like it wasn't even an option to quit because no one else was. And my whole community and my whole life was jiu-jitsu. And I'm not saying that that's necessarily good because that comes with its own pressures. But I do think, especially if we're talking more about people who are starting a little bit later in life, they may have a lot of different priorities and responsibilities pulling them in different directions. And that's a lot of voices maybe telling you you shouldn't be doing this, or it's a waste of time, or what's the point? And so I think that's why I really focus on figuring out how it fits in your life. And it doesn't have to look like it looks for your teammates. It doesn't have to look like for you how it looks for me, but if you find a way to stick with it, I think some of the most inspiring stories are when I hear about someone who's been training 15, 20 years and they get their black belt after 15 or 20 years, And for me, that's just as impressive as a high-level competitor that got it in 6 years or 5 years. That's impressive. But for me, I think it's so impressive to learn about someone or hear someone's story that said, I didn't have the ideal circumstances. Jiu-jitsu wasn't my whole life, but it was a huge part of my life. And I made it work for this extremely long stretch of time, and finding a way to make it work in your life. So you don't have to get your black belt in 6 years or 10 years. It could be 15 years. It could be 20 years, because the ultimate goal really isn't your black belt. It's to continue. It's to keep doing it, And so I think if you put this timeline on yourself, that's really where it gets frustrating. Or if you hear all these voices saying that you should stop because maybe that's not one of their priorities or that's not their role, I think it's very easy to listen to those voices. I didn't have those voices, everyone was saying, keep going, keep going, keep going.
So would you agree then in that sense that the environment we surround ourselves with is more important than actually what we do?
I don't know if it's more important, but I think it's extremely important. I think people can find success in lots of different environments, but I think it can make it easier or harder. Your environment will play a big role, I think, in who you become, how you approach this journey, I think.
Yeah, definitely. It's something for all of us to consider as we continue, starting perhaps or continuing this amazing but yet difficult, hard, complex journey of jiu-jitsu.
I think the thing too is that also recognizing that there's going to be times where it feels impossible, or if you think it's worth it. I definitely wondered if it was worth it. I never thought about quitting, but I wondered if it was worth it. And it was all about just okay, well, what would make it worth it for me? Or thinking, for me, it was always the thought of, well, if I stop right now because it's hard, even if it's just a break, right? For me, consistency was always more important than anything. So even if I felt like I didn't have the emotional bandwidth to give what I would want to give in an ideal world, showing up to me and maintaining some level of consistency I've never really taken a break in 10 years except for my ACL surgery and like a couple injuries, but even in those moments, I was still showing up to the gym. So that consistency, making it a constant piece of my life was something that I think really helped me too, knowing that I didn't always have to show up as the best version of myself, but I was going to come no matter what version I was, and no matter how much I had to give that day, I was going to show up and figure it out.
Yeah, I think that's often underestimated factor behind all of this is the consistency. Is not the 5 or 6 times a week the training, but just simply
Over
showing
years.
up every time you can over the years. As a matter of fact, I know plenty black belts who literally train, 2-3 times a week for 12, 15 years, and they get to that level, and they're actually pretty good at it. They might not be world champions, but there is a level of efficiency and level of commitment that they have shown over the years. And how many times you've seen students showing up 6 days a week, and after
Burnout.
6 months, they fade away.
The consistency, the sustainability is so important. And so like not striving for perfection, but striving for what you can keep up. And you might have to, you'll get feedback from how your mind and body feels, and you might need to change that. But I think that is very underestimated, and also recognizing it is years. It is years, not days, not weeks, not months. It is years.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yeah, no, I agree. I couldn't agree with you more. So as, 11 years ago, all of this was starting in Florida, then you moved over to California, you changed places, you continue growing, and you were looking up at the black belt as a milestone. If you look up in the future, another 11 years from today, what do you see? What's the goal? What's the next milestone?
Yeah. I think it is still mastery. That's always been a goal for me, mastery. And that's not something very tangible, but it's going to keep me going for sure. But it really, I think for me, revolves around growing as an instructor. I feel like I'm very much in the infancy of teaching and instructing. And I feel like that is a whole skill on its own that I am fascinated by and excited by. I want to compete still at black belt. Competing isn't my top priority, but I think it will be a cool experience. And I think it will, I use it as a tool for improvement, but I think what I am honestly most excited about is continuing to grow as an instructor and coach.
Does that mean the Rose Miller Academy at some point?
I don't know. I don't know about an in-person academy. We will see. Right now, I'm happy to have a couple gyms here in San Diego that I teach at. Again, just continuing to build community and grow my skills, but we'll see. Never say never. Never say never.
You never say never. You never know what future holds. I mean, who knows? 10 years ago, 11 years ago, when all of this was starting, were you visualizing that today would be happening? Were you visualizing this as a tangible point? I don't mean it as a dream, but I mean it as something that actually would happen.
I think from the day I started jiu-jitsu, I knew I would do whatever I needed to do to get a black belt. And that was like almost a more important, I don't want to say it was a more important goal for me when I got started, but it seemed like a bigger goal for me back then. And then the more I trained, the more I realized like, I just want to do whatever I need to do to really understand this and keep doing it became the goal. But yeah, I think I had no doubts in my mind that I was going to keep going from the very first day I started.
Well, good for you, because I think a lot of people dream. I mean, humans, I think, are very creatures that visualize and dream things all the time, even from when we are little. Yeah, we all want to be astronauts or nurses or whatever we dream of. But not many really take action, and not many, even less, actually achieve those goals or what they visualize. And older we get, I think those goals get farther away from us. So. I said this in our previous episode. I say it again. Congratulations to you. You're truly an inspiration to many people out there, not only women, but all jiu-jitsu practitioners. You've built something unique. And, I do have to say, we need more people like you. I mean, that's how simple this is. It's amazing to see you grow. It's amazing to catch up with you again. And if anybody wants to connect with you as a follow-up to this conversation, or for whatever inspirational reasons they might need or want or guidance, Where are you available?
Yeah,
Rose?
so Instagram is my main platform. So Rosie Rolls, ROSIE, ROLLZ is where you can find me there. I'm also on TikTok, Patreon, YouTube, all the places. But if you go to my Instagram, my link in bio has everywhere that you can find me. So.
And as always, I will put all the links in the show notes of this episode. And if you guys want a little bit in-depth view on the story, as I mentioned earlier, episode 191 is the original episode that Rose and we had the conversation about her childhood and her moving across the country and all the struggles as it all was unfolding, all the grit that she has demonstrated and enforced in her life. So it's a great conversation there for you guys to listen. Rose, thank you for being here. Once again, I'm so glad to see you. I'm so glad that, there's so much success behind everything that you do. Congratulations. And, there's a little moment of pride, I have to say. Like, last time we talked, you were a brown belt, which is great, but now you're the professor. So, Professor, thank you for being here. Thanks for sharing this last hour or so with me and sharing your story, and continue doing what you're doing.
Thank you so much. It means a lot coming from you, so I appreciate it.
Thank you for listening to RŌL Radio. If you enjoyed the show, don't forget to leave us a review and help us make the show even more amazing. For future episodes, check out our website and follow us on all major podcast platforms. Take care.